a lot of broken relationships, a lot of partying, and kind of the quote unquote hookup culture was kind of part of my life and my story. But at the root of that was an early exposure to pornography at 5 years old. And this is long before the internet. I'm 40 now. So if you do the math, long before the internet. So it only makes you wonder what people are dealing with now, what young people are facing now, considering they got a smartphone in their pocket for most of them. So, but for me, like that exposure to pornography just really shaped the way I saw women and was really objectifying towards women that way. And so this is all the stuff that I carry to Jesus. You know what I mean? Is I'm coming to faith. This is all the brokenness that I'm bringing. This is my offering to God. And I think that's the good news of the gospel, is the sense that people don't have to get their things figured out and get all shinied and cleaned up. Like they get to come with all their brokenness and shame to the cross. And Jesus begins this beautiful work of redemption.
Well, good day and welcome. Thanks for entering the Gray Zone. As always, I'm Robbie, your host, and this is the podcast where your theories are going to come to die. Your theology will get tested. And as always, we remember on the other side of all these issues, there are people whom God loves. Today, my guests are Bryan and Bobby Pugh. Now, they founded a ministry called the Union Movement. This movement exists to, as their website says, help people find wholeness by presenting a gospel-centered, holistic approach to the topics of identity, sexuality, and relationships. I'm going to let them talk about how that's nuanced and what their ministry actually looks like. It's a really good conversation, and glad that they're out there doing that work. But I also want to highlight that they have a conference coming up that we would like to point you toward. If you're anywhere near the northern border of the U.S. and up in there in Canada, you can attend this conference that they are going to be hosting. The conference is called the Called Conference, and it's being hosted in partnership with Renewed and Transformed, another person that we're actually going to have on the podcast in the future. So, but it's an event to gather and work through the spiritual formation and sexual discipleship in a holistic way. So we're praying and believing that it's going to be really successful, and a lot of people are going to be healed. So that is happening in April 10th through 11th in British Columbia. So up there to our neighbors to the north, Canada, love them. So we're going to put information for that conference in the link here, and you should go check it out if you're able and you feel like your heart's tugging on that, or you know someone who might be blessed by that. Here's my conversation, though, with Bryan and Bonnie. Well, g'day. Thank you for entering the Gray Zone yet again. My name is Robbie. I'm your host. And today I am joined by two lovely folks, Bryan and Bonnie. Those are their real names. They're not comic characters. Welcome to the Gray Zone.
Oh, man, it's so good to be here, Robbie. And thanks for this opportunity.
Absolutely. For the record, I don't tell very many people this. My maiden name was Barker. So Bonnie Barker. I had a coworker when I was a barista at Starbucks, and he was like, are you Peter Parker? Like, what's going on here?
That so honestly sounds, yep.
What?
You sound like someone Stanley made up.
Names.
Oh, yeah, I guess, but I'm sorry. I was just trying to figure out the connection between how that was Peter Parker, but I get it now.
Peter Parker, Bonnie Barker, it totally rhymes.
Yeah. I'm glad
it's music. It's music, yeah.
Moving on. Sorry.
Brian's catching up. Bonnie and I are tracking, but
my
it's okay.
bad.
Classic Bryan. I'm a few steps behind, but.
You guys are fun. This is going to be great. Well, you guys, where are you guys coming to us from, first of all?
Yeah, we live in Canada, the western side of Canada. How do I do the conversion from kilometers to miles?
We're like an hour. We're like an hour.
We're like an hour highway drive east of Vancouver, British Columbia.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You're sitting well up there in Canada. Obviously, it's kind of probably looking over the fence at your neighbors going, what's going on, guys?
Yeah. Well, I think
we won't get into that today.
Yeah, well, both of our countries need Jesus. That's for darn sure.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
We can agree on that for sure.
I like that, at least. Yeah. If nothing else, that's always true. So
exactly.
We'll focus on that.
Yeah.
And you guys have a ministry that we're going to dive into, and maybe in a way of introducing that is tell us how this dream came to be. The name of your ministry is the Union Movement. Mm-hmm. What are you guys about?
Well, yeah, it is kind of a bit of a story, but we're happy to share whatever we can here. So the name itself, the Union, was the idea that, I'll start with this. We help people find wholeness in the areas of sexuality, identity, and relationships. So it's not they're not easy topics. But what we really wanted to emphasize is that we want to be more about what we are for than the idea of what we'd be against, or we're not wanting to win arguments we want to help people find wholeness. So the idea of the union, that name itself, is the idea that it's each individual person coming to wholeness, a union of body, soul, spirit, a union with God, a union within relationships, like a oneness that happens. But then also, because these topics can feel shameful for a lot of people, it feels like there's not a lot of people talking about it. They don't really know what to say, but we believe that there are a growing number of voices who are going to be sharing their testimonies and bringing God's his good truth, his good design for these topics. They're going to be raising their voices. And so we wanted to say, like, we're a union of people who are willing to kind of break through the silence, have the awkward conversations, and bring hope to people. So that's kind of why we're called what we're called.
Totally. And you'll probably see it in some of our branding, but we have a flag that we kind of sneak into, like little branding aspects in a lot of what we do. And that's actually, believe it or not, from a movie, Les Miserables, where it's kind of this big revolution that's taking place. And obviously we're not calling people to a political revolution, but like to a revolution of soul, you know what I mean? That Christ would take up root within humanity and change the way that we see, and to see more clearly the gift of God's design for sexuality, identity, and relationships, and really see that it's good, true, and beautiful, and that they would be part of this revolution of carrying the gospel forward, not just behavioral modification, not just more shame and guilt motivated calls to sexuality or sexual integrity, but really a Christ-centered focus to those areas.
I love that. And you mentioned one of my favorite musicals. So if I didn't like you enough because you were Canadian, now I really like you guys. Awesome.
I've read the book, but we are actually going to the Broadway. We've never gone before, but we get to go in March. I'm so excited.
You're really excited.
That'll be fantastic. I've seen it on stage once. It's incredible. Yeah.
Oh,
cool.
They speed it up though, because otherwise it'd be like a 4 or 5 hour show. So they sing it a little faster than you're used to, and you kind of
interesting.
You'll love it. You'll love it.
Cool.
Anyways,
that's great.
We're here just to talk about musicals today, so buckle up, everyone. So the union movement, you're talking about our sexuality, and that's not easy. Maybe someone is sitting here going, why would you ever want to do that? That sounds really hard. Why would you want to venture into this type of work? Is there something in your personal stories that is part of that? Did you just look around you and see the brokenness and, God just lit the flame? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, it's a great question. I think for us, and this is just, I think really how God works, is God's infinite wisdom and how he calls people into a specific work and ministry. It was deeply impacted. Like this message is deeply connected to our own personal stories. So for me, and Bonnie can share her story obviously, but like for me, I wasn't raised in the church. I didn't come to Christ until I just about to graduate high school in 2003. And up until that point, I had really just believed a lot of the same broken messages and distorted messages around even just what it meant to be a man, but specifically around male sexuality and what truly leads to flourishing. I probably wouldn't use that language back then, but it was like this was part of my life. A lot of broken relationships, a lot of partying, and kind of the quote unquote hookup culture was kind of part of my life and my story. But at the root of that was an early exposure to pornography at 5 years old. And this is long before the internet. I'm 40 now. So if you do the math, long before the internet. So it only makes you wonder what people are dealing with now, what young people are facing now, considering they got a smartphone in their pocket from most of them. So, but I digress. But for me, like that exposure to pornography just really shaped the way I saw women and was really objectifying towards women that way. And so this is all the stuff that I carry to Jesus. You know what I mean? Is I'm coming to faith. This is all the brokenness that I'm bringing. This is my offering to God. Like, hey, God, look at this. This is so great. As most people, as all people, we don't have a whole lot to offer in that great exchange that God gives us. But this is where Jesus met me, and I think that's the good news of the gospel, is the sense that people don't have to get their things figured out and get all shinied and cleaned up. Like
Mm.
they get to come with all their brokenness and shame to the cross, and Jesus begins this beautiful work of redemption. But there were so many things that started to change in my life as I put my faith in Christ. But specifically, this area of sexuality and specifically, coping with porn didn't change, didn't go away. And but through a process as being a part of discipleship school, being planted in the local church I was in, and just thankfully I had some great men around me who really helped me to walk into integrity and walk into freedom. But the other reality too, I was sitting in that discipleship school and we had a guest speaker come and he was teaching for just several days on God's design for sexuality, the role of the church in reformation of culture and reaching those who are far from Christ, and being salt and light, but also how the enemy distorts sexuality, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, in order to try to shortcut or to try to push back against God's plan for the church in the earth. How does he ruin marriages, families, everything like that? It's distortion of what it means to be human and sexuality. So I essentially see my life on a whiteboard. And it was in that moment, I'm just going, God, I want to give my life for this message so that my generation doesn't have to experience what I did. And that was in 2005. And, Bonnie and I were married in 2007, and it wasn't until 2018 that we started this ministry, really locking into this. But this was like a real passion for us all along the way, was like, God's design for this is good. Mm-hmm. It's true. It's beautiful. It actually leads to flourishing. And we just saw a lot of people come out of the woodwork as we started to talk about it. So it was just really a life message for us. But that's a little bit of my story and why it's so important to me.
Yeah. And on the
never a short story. Give a platform to a preacher, I go over time. So
no, you're good. You're totally good.
You're good, man.
I was more like the homeschool church kid, and I would say a level. Oh, really?
Let's go. I knew we were among friends.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, safe space.
Yeah.
And so I have really fond memories of my childhood, and no family is perfect, but I feel like my parents were really intentional, and they, we just had great family dinners, and we'd have campouts and whatever, just good times in the church. I could count on probably one hand the number of Sundays that I missed. Like, we go on holidays, you go find a church wherever you're going on holidays, right? It's just we're the people of God. We meet with the people of God. And I loved it. And I would say that I had encounters with the Lord from a young age. And not that, again, I had to be saved, and I had to be regenerated. I was dead in my trespasses as a homeschool church kid, and I had to get saved. So I don't want to make it seem like that's a whole nother story. But something that was really impactful in my life when I was 15 years old, found out that the youth pastor at the time was actually committing adultery with a young woman in our youth group. And that devastated me. And it just kind of sent me spiraling that summer in the questions of how do I trust men? How do I trust church leaders? Sex feels like this wicked force that comes and overpowers people. Which that's a horrible feeling as a young woman. What is my future going to be if that's what sex is, And so I had to really go through a process of forgiveness and learning how to, bless someone even who had hurt me so badly as a leader. And it was when I was 19 years old, in a similar classroom to what Bryan mentioned, with the same guest speaker, that I was really, I don't know, it felt like it just tied it all together, of these questions I'd had at a young age. Even I remember reading the Bible and being like, why is there so much language in the Old Testament about Israel being a prostitute? What? I don't get it, right? I'm like an 11-year-old wondering, why is there so much sexual language? And so this guest speaker, who is now a good friend and mentor in our life, he really tied it together. And it was like, because it's metaphorical language, but it's also literal language, where the people of God have always come up against a false god system that is getting humans to kind of like sacrifice what God has intended for them when it comes to sexuality, to give it up, to not be faithful, to kind of not govern themselves, and instead to just indulge. And you see that in the Old Testament, you see it in the New Testament, that the early church was in those cultures, and unfortunately, the people of God in the Old Testament really failed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, seeing this pattern that it's still happening today, and it's not just in the world, it's the people of God who
Yeah.
should know, who've been given the instructions, who are compromising. So I felt like it just made things so clear for me. But then also a huge message of, like Bryce said, of redemption,
Mm-hmm.
that the gospel can touch even these most broken parts, most shameful parts of people's past and their history. And so it's kind of the same thing. I don't think it was the same prayer of, like, the exact words, but just a feeling of like, I saw this devastate my church. I saw it
Mm.
happen. It devastated me. And like, what if we could, just talk about it more and bring hope to people? And so then when we would be involved in youth and young adult ministry, then we would always be kind of advocating for conversation about it and seeing beautiful testimonies come forward. We've realized everybody has a story, church kid, not church kid. Everybody
Yes.
has been touched by this. And so
Totally.
just by talking about it, bringing things into the light, it's amazing that the darkness really can't overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned, it's kind of risky, but what it feels like is if we went to the grave, if we were old people, gray hair, looking at each other and had not tried, I don't think we could live with ourselves. Like
Totally.
it's like a sense of, I guess, where Jeremiah says, like, it's like burning in my bones if I don't talk about it. And so I don't think it's like, are we the most professional? Are we the most polished? Are we the most even capable to do this? But it's like, well, we got to at least try,
Yeah.
And I think that would be my encouragement for even church leaders or anyone who's a believer, is like, we got to try, because so many people's lives are hanging in the balance on this topic around sexuality.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I
yeah.
hear in both your stories, it makes sense that you guys were led to do this because you experienced a moment with an event with a speaker that kind of was crystallizing. Like in your own mind and in your own private time, you're working through things. You're kind of discovering your faith, Bryan and Bonnie's. You're wrestling with this for years and the brokenness of that tragedy that happened. And you're going, in this one moment, it all clicked. So no wonder you guys are kind of out there now trying to do that for other people in a way. You're like,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what? We need to talk, even if we only reach, 100 people this weekend, or, 500 or whatever. There's people who are like us sitting in those chairs who need to
Absolutely.
That's
hear
right.
these words. That's going to
Yeah.
bring or start a
Absolutely.
journey of healing. Yeah.
Yeah. We
So good.
often, I've heard it said, and we say it a lot in church, like, hey, like, leave your baggage at the door, leave it at the cross. And I go, I think that's all true and good. But I think this is the avenue in which God turns it back on the enemy's head with all the brokenness he tries to do, is when people experience the freedom and experience Jesus breaking chains in their life, but they don't just leave them on the ground. They pick them up and they start to wield them around as weapons to destroy the lies in other people's lives. You know what I mean? Like, hey, like, listen, like, look at what Jesus did in my life, and the power of testimony that we have to be able to share, like, the goodness of what Jesus really does in changing the hearts of people and separating our history from our heart, and from breaking shame and launching people into a beautiful redemptive story. Like, that is the narrative that people need to hear. That is the good news that the world is longing for, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah.
Is that there's a way out of this brokenness and quote unquote hell that they're living in. And this is why it's so important for us as a church to be that city on a hill that is providing a way out of the brokenness and a high ground to come to out of the flood of broken promises in society and culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What are our scars good for if they don't tell a story of healing?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So true.
Bonnie, you kind of alluded to this too, that and we're all kind of in the same age bracket where, we grew up in the era where you didn't talk about these things, or it was very taboo. It was purity culture. It was kiss dating goodbye, that era. And you said, bringing things into the light is actually what helped. And that can be proactive as well. I think a lot of what you guys are doing is obviously responsive to bring healing, but
Hmm.
a lot of it can also be proactive. It's like, if we're not
Hmm.
talking about it, they're still thinking about it. They're still
Yes.
working this out. And if we don't have healthy, places like your organization to go to, they're going to TikTok, they're
Yeah.
going to YouTube, they're gonna get the answers. And so I feel like in the past, when the church has, just left the lights off on some of that stuff, we've done harm, because they're gonna go find answers somewhere, and they're
Hmm.
gonna be doing it in shame and in secret and
Right.
with people who aren't safe. So can we get specific about your context? Like, what are you guys seeing?
Hmm.
What does the sexual brokenness look like in Canada and the areas that you are? Um, I'd imagine it matches similar to what I see, but just curious what
Yeah.
you guys see.
Yeah. What's, I think an area when people hear that we talk about sexuality, identity, relationships, they probably go to like, well, I think when we first started, everyone would say like, "Oh, so do you guys talk about homosexuality?" And we would say, "Oh, yes, yes, we do." And now the question would be like, "Oh, do you guys talk about transgenderism?" "Oh, yeah, yeah, we do." But also what we're trying to do is help people see like what has led us to this place, where what was once considered like common or like the general narrative in society is has shifted so much. And so
Mm,
like so to answer your question, what are we seeing? Here's something that I am seeing and causes me great concern is that there are a lot of young women who do not feel safe to be young women because their power to attract, their natural God given beauty, is putting a target on them.
Hmm.
I'm seeing, so I'm seeing a rejection, either, yeah, it's like a distortion, either okay, I'm going to run with this and I'm going to become the overtly sexualized girl, or I am going to resist my beauty altogether so that I can camouflage and go fly under the radar. So no
mm,
one will, so that maybe I won't get assaulted again, stuff like that. What does that look like when if you have a whole generation of girls who are being told the majority of their value is in what they look like and how they could perform sexually,
Yeah.
and then a generation of girls who are then scared, scared of men, scared to be women. What does that start to do in a society? So what are we seeing a lot of? I'm like, I see a lot of that. And I'm, it's often women who are talking to me. That is widespread
Yeah.
mm.
in the church. I mean, we are primarily ministering within the church, and
Hmm.
this is what I'm hearing and seeing.
Yeah. And I don't think it's just anecdotally like Bonnie's or
Hmm.
our experience. Like a lady named Abigail Schreier in her book Irreversible Damage, in her study of talking to young ladies specifically who were dealing with gender dysphoria and even dressing like in some sort of androgynous way. Like it's
Hmm.
not standing out that it's obviously feminine. Um, they said it's not that we want to be a man, it's just we don't want to be a woman. It's like,
Mm.
what is that? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
What type of culture breeds that? And I'm of the persuasion, and people can push back if they want, but they'd be wrong. But but like I'm convinced that when a culture that is hypersexualized, what we're living in, at least in the West, um, is not a great atmosphere for the heart of a woman or heart of a daughter.
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing specifically in young ladies in this cultural moment, that rejection of their femininity and or going hyper the one way, like it is destructive to
Hmm.
the image of God that's within a female heart. And obviously it shows up in men too, and it's
Yeah.
destructive to men, but I think it's extremely potent towards women.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
So
breaks my heart when I hear that.
I know. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we have sons, but then we have nieces, and we have a beautiful church community where there's these young girls, from age I mean, I'm thinking of the one little girl, she's 5 years old, and then we got, just friends of the family, right? And or 11 and 12 and 13, and I'm just watching them, and I'm looking, and I'm so grateful to see that they still have the spark in their eye, like the joy in their eye. And I know that there's dads present in their
Hmm.
life, blessing them, guarding over them, reminding them of their identity. But then I also know, like, I was a church girl, and I remember feeling, I didn't like, where did it come from? It's like we don't really realize what we're swimming in, kind of like, because it's such a normal,
Hmm.
Yeah.
like, entertainment and advertising and the books and the friends and the whatever. But I remember feeling like I'm gonna have to kind of like, if I don't want to be alone, if I'm gonna get a guy to choose me, I'm gonna probably have to play the game,
Yeah.
and how do we, like, we have to teach girls otherwise. And that's where I think the presence of the fathers who can bless their complete identity, throughout their whole lifetime. And it's not like suddenly when your body changes, now you're valuable. It's like, no, I'm seen as a person, as a whole person, and I'm blessed for it within my family, within my church community, that kind of stuff. And so
Yeah.
I think,
Mm.
yeah, we just got have a heart for that, but then a heart also to equip the young men to realize how their role is so important. Because I think
Yeah.
a lot of, another huge pattern we see is that men are treated as though their masculinity itself is toxic, instead of realizing, no, there's immaturity could be seen is toxic, but not masculinity itself. Masculinity is essential and a gift to society. Um, yeah. Anyways.
It's self-centered masculinity, and I often use this language that masculinity is not the problem, but toxic masculinity is what happens when little boys get bigger but they don't grow up. Right. So they're essentially living for themselves. Now they just have a whole lot of testosterone, and they're convinced that
Mhm.
everything around them is for their own selfish pleasure. And that is destructive, because the same masculinity that could, physically force someone to do something sexually is the same masculinity and physicality that could pull somebody from a burning car. So it's like, what is the direction and the intention of our design? Is it for the sake of others that we're cultivating our strength, or are we cultivating for ourselves? And that excuse me, and that is like, even in the topic of sexuality and sexual integrity for men, this is, a good friend and mentor of ours said this, like, the most important understanding or revelation that a man needs to receive is the design of a daughter's heart. And secondly is the demonic hatred that the enemy has for what is in a daughter's heart. And I think that
Mm.
that shifts the narrative from men just bouncing their eyes
Mhm.
and having their purity banned and just looking at the ground. And it's like, at times, like, my goodness, like, we live in a in a pornographic culture. Sometimes you just got to bounce your eyes. But at the same time too, I think God wants to put something deeper within our heart, where we're able to look at this young lady or this woman who has, adopted this seductive identity and the spirit of the age, and see her for a daughter whom the Lord loves and whom the Lord laid his life down for, and to actually be a protector and not a predator, right? Because everybody
Mm.
else looks at that lady and sees them as an object, where what I think true, genuine purity, if we're going to use that language, and sexual integrity for men is to be able to look past that and actually see the value and as we've mentioned before, the image of God and the daughter within that young lady. Because I don't think any little girl playing in a sandbox or playing with her dolls ever goes, I can't wait to be on OnlyFans when I'm older.
Yeah.
Right now, we're starting to see that now, because the messaging is seeping down to younger and younger ages. But I
Yeah.
don't think any little girl in her heart of hearts goes, I can't wait to be objectified by the entire world. I can't wait to be on multiple screens, and I can't wait to be pixelized for my sexuality across the world.
Mhm.
Like, nobody does that. It's only when a daughter's heart has been lied to, and her image has been distorted, her identity has been distorted.
Yeah, absolutely. I was recently teaching on the fruits of the spirit, and we came up to that topic of masculinity, because what we like about a big, strong man is we like a big, strong man when he exudes the fruits of the Spirit.
Right.
Yeah.
A big,
Right.
strong man without gentleness, without self-control, without kindness, without goodness is a
Mm-hmm.
scary person.
Absolutely.
And we're not just picking on men, we're all called to exude those things, but
For sure.
it's a big difference. And that's where it gets toxic. I agree with you, is when we are not acting in the healthy way that God has called men and women to act in their sexuality. Yeah.
Totally.
We've danced around this. We haven't said it, but I'm hearing you guys say we're about sexuality and teaching people the proper way about it. But you're not talking about sexuality as the cause of the brokenness. You're talking about culture, you're talking about messaging, you're talking about how we're reared and raised,
Mm-hmm.
and how the broken parts of that are infecting our sexuality and sexual expression. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, like, if you go back to the very beginning of humanity's woes, it's a conversation that the serpent has with a woman named Eve and a man named Adam, who's not doing what he's supposed to do, who's kind of watching this conversation. But the whole question is that the serpent asks Eve is, did God really say?
Mm.
Did God really say, don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? And this whole conversation that goes on there, like, that is the same questioning that's going on in our culture today. That is the reality of the enemy of our souls. That's the type of questions he asks. He distorts the character of God, distorts the design of God, and sows a sense of insecurity within the heart of people that they can't trust God with their entirety of their being, and that they need to go and essentially shape their own perspective and more morality and their own worldview to be like God. You know what I mean? And that's even the statement that's made in the garden. And so is it because I think in so many ways the sexual revolution didn't cause a sexual revolution, right? This eroding of those basic fundamentals of what it means to be human, being an image bearer, God's plan for humanity, this good and perfect gift called, well, imperfect in how we experience it, but the beauty of God's design for marriage. All those things being distorted, and like it's a culmination of that lie of, like, did God really say? And so it just shows up in sexuality, but it's a much broader topic.
Mm-hmm. And if you've grown up in the church, then you've heard we do have three battles to fight. One is within our own sinful nature, that we do have this tendency. Everyone's tempted maybe in different ways, but we all have a tendency towards just taking care of ourselves over taking care of others, right? It's easier to love ourselves than it is to love others, to sacrifice for others. And then we have the battle of what's going on in the culture. Scripture talks about, the principalities. Well, that's more of the spiritual, but the systems of this world.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the principalities and the demonic realm that I think preys upon, sees the weaknesses of humanity and the systems and works to distort the image of God in us.
Yeah.
So we have three things that we have to be alert to and be battling.
Mm-hmm.
Bonnie, what's it like raising young men in this era? I mean, besides the obvious fun parts of boys are already something special, but
there's something special. It's true. Yeah. I mean, Bryan spoke to this earlier about, like, reminding men that they're made to be protectors. And something that we saw, so we had 5 sons in 6 years, and then 6 years later had another son. So the cluster of 5 boys, I wondered if maybe they had influenced each other in their love of the stories of the hero, the stories of the knight, the superheroes, it was just battle all the time. So what's it like raising boys? You end up installing bylaws that you may not do weapon sounds at the table, that we don't do Nerf guns before breakfast or after dinner. Yeah. Like there's like the containing. I don't want to stop the battle, but I'm saying I need some times where there's no battle. Anyway, so that was a tornado of battle when those 5 were young. And then Okay, they
Well,
start getting older.
these rules probably apply to you too, Brian, right? Like she's
Yeah,
not
Jesus,
of
saying it,
course.
but
Brian, enough.
She's just
no
being
nerf
kind and
before.
honoring of me in this space. But
Well, we put down wrestling mats and be like, okay, one at a time, everybody wrestle dad, and just
Yeah, that's the best. Sorry, I
totally.
interrupted you, but
no, that's totally fine. Anyway, so there's this battle. But then it was 6 years later that we had another son. And I found it fascinating. So by the time he, 2 and 3 years old, the others had kind of put away a lot of their costumes and their toys, and we'd given away the night costume, and they weren't doing gun sounds so often. But yet our little guy, his name's Theodore, he showed me the same nature, that he was ready for the fight, that he, like, if he wanted to rescue me, he wanted to, like, even not too long ago, then he comes through with a Nerf gun. He's just like, have you seen any bad guys, Mom? And I'm like making lunch. I'm like, yes, actually, they're in the living room. Hurry, please help me. And he like takes off running, and he comes back. He's like, I took care of it. Anyway, so I say all that is that what we've seen in our boys is that they for sure wrestle with their flesh. And we've had lots of conversations, and they are not perfect humans. They've wrestled with their flesh. They've wrestled with you could say they've wrestled with demonic oppression on the area of sexuality. They've wrestled with culture, but they have never rejected the idea that they were designed to be protectors and not predators. They know at the core of who they are that they're made for that. And so every once in a while when we're speaking at a church or at a different event, I just love to remind the young men in the room of who they are, and that they were made to be the hero, and that we as women, even though like we are strong women, intelligent women, capable women, we need them, because the world is trying to, and the enemy, just like with Adam standing passively by while Eve is being targeted, if he would have just stepped in and been like, hey, hun, maybe we could talk about this before you make the call, make the decision. Don't you remember what God said?
Yeah.
Right? Like, we desperately need Adam. And I hate the way that men and women are pitted against each other. And when it's like, no, we need each other in this fight. And you need me and I need you, right?
Yeah.
Together we're in it. So I'm encouraged by that, having six sons who, again, they're not perfect and make mistakes, but we can call them up and call them to who they really are, who they've been designed to be, and they can't deny it. So
yeah, you're giving them a high call. You're giving them something that, the shadow of it, the I guess what's the word I'm trying to find? The demonization of that strength and protection is, we get Andrew Tate and folks like him.
For sure.
Like, what should be strong and compassionate and protective is dominant and violent, and it's so evil. And and we can say the same thing for what women are called to be, as nurturing and wise and partners and all the good, and that gets destroyed into just like you said, the pornographic sort of lifestyle, and using their sexuality as a means to get and to control, and it's awful.
And we saw this like a cool example of where this kind of came, like a piece of the harvest, I guess, of the seeds that we've been sowing in our boys. One of our boys started a job a few months ago, and he didn't tell us the story, but one of his brothers did. He's like, did you hear what he did at work the other day? We're like, no, what? I guess one of his coworkers, a female coworker, was at the till, and an older man was speaking a different language. There's a lot of cultures in our area. Was speaking a different language, but our son could tell that he was being inappropriate to her. And so he kind of just like leaned in and looked this older man in the eye and just said, that's enough. And the man turned around and left. And I was like,
it's my boy.
I'm so proud of him. And this coworker, is probably like embarrassed, but also really grateful. And I just think, what if more 15-year-olds just went, that's enough.
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't get to do that in my presence. I think that would be a win. That would be go in the right direction.
Yeah, certainly would.
Yeah.
So it's an expression. We're talking a lot about the expression of our God-given genders and how that leads to a more healthy and fulfilling kind of sexual,
Hmm.
life as God has ordained within marriage. Um, what about the folks who come to you who kind of come really broken? People don't choose gender dysphoria. It's not like a trend. It hurts. It's deeply,
Hmm.
painful, and people
Mhm.
with that experience, people who are experiencing feelings that, that the language that helps them understand it is they call themselves trans, just to kind of make sense of this is what's happening to me.
Sure.
Mhm.
We know that's not God's design for them, but there are people who that's where they're at when they come to you, and and various other things. People who experience same sexual attraction and things like that.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So when they're coming, um, they're not coming with a culture necessarily made me this way. They're like, this is what I'm feeling in my body and my mind.
Mhm.
Help, or
Yeah.
how do I work this out in a Christian context? Like, do you have any
Mhm.
stories, or like what's your posture or your approach for those folks?
Yeah, there definitely are stories, and maybe you can share the story part. I think as far as like how we communicate this is like, I think unfortunately when it's come to same sex attraction or homosexual tendencies or transgenderism or anything like, or any that gender dysphoria, that disconnect between someone's inner being and their physical being, I think we've elevated that to be like that's the worst possible sins that you could ever commit, and that's like the worst possible thing anybody could ever struggle with. And I think
Yeah.
what's actually helpful is to not have multiple scales. Like we have one scale and we've all fallen
Yeah.
short, and we all experience the fall within our bodies and within our soul and within avenues of who we are. Like, myself, as I've never dealt with same-sex attraction, I've never dealt with gender dysphoria, but I like there's a reality of my desires need to be submitted to the lordship of Christ too, and how Christ is in by the Spirit is sanctifying who I am. But if I hold on to that identity and I go, well, no, but this is who I am, it's like I'm actually holding back what Christ is actually longing to do in my life. And so I think when we talk about this with people who might struggle with gender dysphoria or struggle with same-sex attraction, is we're saying, listen, the world wants to make this like your entire identity, and we actually have a better story for you, a better reality is you get to be in Christ. And that gets to be the most important part of who you are. Um, because it's like everybody deals with desires at times that are contrary, right? But we
Right.
don't let those desires govern. I think I can say it. We don't even let those words come out of our mouth. We don't let those desires govern who we are,
Right.
but we put to death desires that are contrary to the heart of God, and cultivate
Yeah.
beautiful desires, good desires, noble desires, in the light of who Christ is. But the work of sanctification is shaping our identity, is finding it more and more in Christ as a son or a daughter, and is shaping our practice that we get to learn. We're learning to live and move in Him as He's always designed, and that's not free from suffering.
Mhm.
I think we all experience suffering. We all experience in deep within us, and our hope is not. Our hope is ultimately in the resurrection. Our hope is in the glorification that will be when that one day we get to be transformed, and be with Him as He is. That's our greatest hope. But I think that same power of resurrection is working in us now to shape us and to cause us to be new creations in Him.
Yeah. And I think when we're, speaking at events, and in some ways we're trying to get underneath the labels, of like gender dysphoria or transgenderism. Like we'll talk about it openly, but what we're trying to do is kind of go, why do you think this might be happening? And maybe tell stories from our own lives or what we're
Yeah.
observing. And in some ways it gives permission for people to acknowledge even when it's at a seed form, instead of, this big giant, like, oh my gosh, I think I'm trans. Like it's like, can we identify it at a seed form? So something I've done, I talk about how when I was young, I I didn't deal with gender dysphoria, but I dealt with something that could be called gender discontentment. And when I say things like that, most of the room is like nodding, like, yeah, I get it. Um, it's kind of hard to be a woman. Oh, you know what? It's actually kind of hard to be a guy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so even with our own kids, like to say like, yeah, you know what? Each creation, Elizabeth Elliot said it this way, every creature could complain of its design. You know,
Mm.
um, i- there's there's like the grass looks greener on the other side. You know, as a little girl, I'm thinking, why don't I get to like in the summer when it's hot? Why do I have to keep my shirt on? you
Mhm.
know, or like I wish I could pee standing up. That looks convenient, or like that seems convenient, right? Like it's so minimal, but there's okay. Well, let's like we've been talking about, like let's take that scale further. Um, and so I think by identifying there's these challenges for each of us, then we can go, okay, but is the Lord sovereign and did he call me to this? And that's
Mm-hmm.
what happened in my life when I was 19
Mm.
years old. I felt like the Holy Spirit whispered to me and brought me peace and just said, I made you a girl on purpose for a purpose. And so we're trying to speak that to people so that they know, even if they are facing challenges, that like what Bryan was saying, there is a sanctification that is
Mm-hmm.
available. Um, a good friend of ours, we've known her now for a couple years, and she's in our region as well. Her name's Kyla Gillespie, and she talks about, and her book is actually coming out very soon, where it's a kind of a full biography. If people are interested, it's called Transformed. Um, but she dealt with same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria, and ended up transitioning and living as a man for 6 years. But then through, it was a recovery program, came to the church and kind of got knit into a community of believers. And then one day felt like I need to be honest with these people that my name's not Bryson. Like I was born as
Yeah.
Kyla.
Mm-hmm.
And so she shares with them and they were like, okay, well, like, you know what we believe and what we, God's design, male, female, and all this stuff. You know what we think, but we'll walk with you. Like, there's no rejection. We love you.
Yeah.
And so then within, I think it's roughly around another year, she felt like the Lord said, return to me, Kyla. And she's asking this question, couldn't I just like serve you as a godly man? And she's like, she just knew that the Lord was saying, like, I know that detransitioning is rare. Now she's been detransitioned for many years now. Her doctors were saying, we've never walked anyone back before. We don't know how this is going to look.
Mm-hmm.
But she just felt like I need to trust God with this. And so she, with the support of her local church, detransitioned. And now she's sharing her testimony how the transition didn't solve the problem. And in her book, she
Mm.
describes how she experienced sexual assault as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it's not like you can't just say it always is that way where, sexual assault is going to cause gender dysphoria. But if we look at the numbers of the amount of children who are experiencing um, abuse and molestation and premature exposure to sexual content, like, how is it not affecting our souls?
Yeah.
Right. So I think if as the church we get better at addressing the atmosphere that our young people are growing up in,
Mhm.
and then also making space for people who to be healed from the like trauma of assault, I think we're gonna, like, if we go after that, then we're not just saying like, you people who deal with dysphoria, you're the problem. Instead, we're like, no, 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 like, we understand you're going through a lot. And how about we could clear away some obstacles for you, and then we can talk more about the dysphoria. Let's clear these other obstacles out of the way first, though.
Yeah.
I think it's a patient approach. It's um, they're not the enemy. They're not, they are precious
Yeah.
It's
image
pastoral.
bearers.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think that's like a really important point to highlight in Kyla's story is she wasn't in an affirming church. She wasn't in like a quote
Mhm.
unquote progressive church that was just um all on board with all the LGBTQ ideology. She
Right.
was in like a Bible believing Orthodox, like conservative church. And they said, listen, like, and she knew where the church stood.
Mhm.
but it was this radical truth mixed with this radical grace that and this patience to walk with her that actually caused her to grow and flourish
Mm.
at this point where the Lord's now saying, "Return to me, Kyla." And it wasn't, there was hard conversations. She talks about in the book, there was tons of hard conversations
Mhm.
and on both sides of people having to ask for forgiveness. Like, hey, we realized we didn't approach that right, or we didn't approach that with enough sensitivity that we should have. And it's like, but I think those types of conversations are worth stumbling through and worth tripping through
Mhm.
with humility and grace,
Yeah.
because it's like, I think this is the testimony that we're going to see more and more in the years to come, because some of these ideas and
Mhm.
these practices of transitioning, they've been around for long enough that we're starting to see the fruit of it, because it doesn't fix the problem. You can change someone's physicality, and that might give a temporal sense of euphoria. But I think from a lot of the studies and a lot of the stories I've read, it's a shocking reality of, oh my goodness, I'm still dealing with brokenness on the inside, and
Mhm.
only
Mhm.
going down this road has only made it worse, and has only
Mhm.
brought a greater sense of shame and condemnation. And so I think here's a great opportunity for the church to lovingly and compassionately and gracefully and yet truthfully carry the gospel and the heart of God to these people.
Mhm.
We often talk about it, it's in Isaiah, but like this amazing promise that God gives to the quote unquote eunuch. And it's like, let the eunuch say, that I am not cut off. The one that, I'm totally trying to paraphrase Isaiah, so bear with me here. But it's like the eunuch saying, like, "Oh, I'm cut off from God, and I'm a dried up branch." You know what I mean? I'm not fruitful because of the changes done to the physicality of this person. Yet God says, if this eunuch will honor my Sabbath, and what's the other,
Keep my covenant.
and keep my covenant,
Mhm.
then I will like, and let them not say that they are cut off. And if they do, if they keep the covenant and they honor my Sabbath, I will give them a name greater than son or daughter, is
Mhm.
one of the promises. And I go, oh my goodness, like that carries over directly
Yes.
to people who have maybe made these decisions with their body in the
Mhm.
in the attempt to try to find this integration or this connection again.
Peace, yeah.
I go, like, what an incredible promise that the Lord has made a space for you, and is even willing to give you a name greater than son or daughter. It's like, how
Yeah.
beautiful is that,
Mhm. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and
I
then
was
you see
talking. I'm
oh,
sorry. Go
sorry.
ahead, buddy.
Well, I was just gonna say you see the fulfillment of that promise in Isaiah of, like, bringing the eunuch in. There's a space for you, in the book of Acts where Philip on the road meets the eunuch from
Yeah.
Ethiopia,
that's right, of
and
course.
gets to baptize him, and it's like, there was no spot for within the inner sanctuary of the temple for people whose, it says in is it Leviticus where
Yeah, and Deuteronomy as well. Yep.
it's like, no, they can't come in if their testicles have been crushed or whatever, but then it's like, well, here's a eunuch getting baptized into the church. It's like, there's a spot for you here.
Yeah, come
And
on.
so I think, uh, yeah, I think we're going to see, I think the tide is turning, whether people in Canada know it or not. We're seeing it in the lawsuits around the world, and Canada's going to have
Yeah.
to read the scientific journals of what's going on. The church is going to need to make a space
Hmm.
and walk with people patiently. And man,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Anyways.
that's what you guys are doing. That's what the union movement is doing. We're trying to create space for those things to
Hmm.
happen.
Yeah.
And, even your story of your friend, like that church being like, here's the truth. And we're okay if this takes a really long time.
Yeah.
And we're okay if, this is hard and awkward and strange. And also, there's other things in your life that need to be redeemed by God. We
Oh
want to
yeah.
start with one of those, like we want to, we get culture war and enemy and turn them into a problem. And suddenly we're just chasing down something that maybe they're not ready, or God's not even ready for them to work on just yet. Like, thank God she
Right.
was able to come to church and
Yeah.
learn about the Bible and be invited in. And I respect that about what you guys are saying is, this needs to be a patient journey. And every person coming in straight, bi, gay, everything,
Hmm.
Hmm.
victim of assault, all of those people are on the same level. They're
Yes.
all coming in with a need to be heard and understood and loved, and to find God's way to redeem
Yeah.
whatever brokenness they're coming in from, which I think is good. If we go directly to, well, you're gay, so you're sinful, we're missing the mark
Totally.
there. We've got,
Totally.
like you said, Bonnie, like, let's get underneath that. Let's figure out what, because, that just might be their answer to a thing that they're feeling. And the world has told them this is the best way to alleviate that
Hmm.
feeling,
Yeah.
that brokenness. This is
Yeah.
the best path for you. And you're going,
Absolutely.
the Bible has a better path. And we want to take the time to walk you on that path as long as that takes, because you're worth taking that time for.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I think the world system would say that this is the only aspect of who you are. This is the most important part of who you are.
Yeah.
And I go, we're not doing people any service in the church if that's how we approach them too. Because exactly like you said, like are there other areas in our life that you might need redemption? So if a person coming in who's practicing homosexual and is whatever, like comes in and is like if they didn't have that part of who they are, would they still need Christ? Would they still need redemption? Would they still need to be justified in Christ, to be sanctified, to be redeemed? Of course they would.
Right.
But I think what we're trying to do at the Union is to reintegrate this avenue of sexuality and identity into the discipleship pathway of every local church, because this is a discipleship conversation. What are you going to do with your sexual desires? Who's going to be Lord of your life? How are you going to govern your desires? What are you going to allow to shape your identity, and what's going to shape your practice?
Yeah.
And this is a discipleship conversation. It's not exclusive from
Yes.
anything else. So
Yeah.
No argument here. I love that you guys are out there doing that. I told you earlier, I mean, we could talk for hours. Obviously, you guys don't have that time, but we'll have to bring you back if you'd like. But
yeah, I'd love
you
that.
have a couple things to highlight. You guys have an event coming up. We want to talk about that real briefly before we go. So what's happening?
Cool. Yeah, we're hosting the Called Conference, and actually, our friend that we mentioned, Kyle Gillespie, we are partnering together. So she has a ministry called Renewed and Transformed. We have the Union Movement, and we just said, hey, look, like we're doing the same. Like, I know we're highlighting different aspects of our stories, but like we're doing the same work. Like, what if we started to create this event that becomes known as a spot for spiritual formation and sexual discipleship? So April 10th and 11th in Abbotsford, British Columbia, we're going to be hosting a conference, and we're going to be, in the general sessions talking about the big themes that apply to us all. But then we have breakout sessions that we're going to dive deeper into the more niche areas where people might have questions, or might have someone that they, someone in their life that they really want to figure out how to support. That's our goal for the breakout sessions. And so time of worship, prayer, reflection, conversation. So if anybody wants to come out to Abbotsford, we'd be really happy to meet them and share. So
get to experience the west coast of Canada.
Yeah, that's
Let's
right.
go.
And by April,
I'll
gosh,
I'll go anywhere
pretty.
in Canada right now. I'll go anywhere. I don't care.
Oh, dude, you should come.
I've never been up, so it's definitely on the bucket list. My brother lives in Minnesota. That's close enough. I can hop over.
Yeah, that's about as Canadian as the U.S. gets, is Minnesota.
Is Minnesota? They are pretty friendly.
They are, yeah.
You guys have the best stereotypes. We don't do so well with our stereotypes.
Oh man.
Hockey and kindness. Would one of you guys be willing to just pray a blessing or prayer for us as we go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, why don't you?
Father, thank you. Thank you for this space. Thank you for this opportunity that we've been able to have in talking about things that really, really matter. God, your design for what's true, good, and beautiful for sexuality, for identity, and God, ultimately, the greatest story ever told, the reality of you coming and living in a human condition, taking up the form of a human, and living the life that we should have lived, dying the death that we deserved, God, so you could give us a gift that we could never buy in redemption, in forgiveness, and really a reconciliation of our identity and an integration of who we are, a sanctification of who we are. And so we're so grateful for that, Lord. And we do pray, God, for anybody who's been listening here today, that Lord, you would cause your word to dwell in their hearts and to produce fruits of righteousness, peace, and joy, all the realities of what your kingdom is, God. And Lord, for those who are dealing with shame or dealing with brokenness, Lord, we thank you that that you love to restore the years that the enemy has stolen. You love to separate our history from our heart. And Lord, I pray for freedom in their lives, and that they get to walk in the beauty and the calling that you have for them.
Hmm.
In Jesus' name,
Yeah.
amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you both so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's been an honor.